Indeed. Liberal Senator James McGrath joins me live from the Gold Coast. And yeah, you worked for Boris Johnson when he was Mayor of London. Will your former boss have a win, do you think?
The Tories will have a win and the country will have a win, because the alternative, Corbyn, minority government, will just destroy that country and, as Alexander Downer said, destroy the UK's relationships with so many countries around the world.
What would Boris Johnson be like today on election day? What sort of person is he? Would he be stressed, relaxed? You know him better than most. How would he be today after the 6-week campaign? But a campaign really that's been going for many months.
He'll be actually a little bit impatient. He'll be wanting the result to come through. It's really weird. So for the listeners who and the people who are watching this who are unaware of what happens over there with a voluntary voting system is everything about today is getting the vote out. So, you know, when you vote in Australia, you go down to the local school or the school hall or whatever it is, and you get assaulted by, people like me giving a bit of paper to you. That doesn't happen in the UK. The action is actually getting out people on the streets. So you have mapped out where the Tory voters are, and you want to make sure those Tory voters get out and vote. And you don't want to get out the Labor voters or the Lib Dem voters or the Green voters. It's getting your votes out. So there's a massive operation underway at the moment. It would have started very early this morning, UK time, that you would have gone out, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and only at Tory voting households would you have put bits of paper through the letterbox, quietly, or through under the doormat or on the door handle going, make sure you vote, with polls opening at 7 o'clock their time. So when you're a leader, while all your volunteers and people out doing that, there's not much you can do. And because of their rules over there, they can't even really talk about politics today on the broadcast news over there. So he would be just sitting at home being impatient, talking with friends, talking with his close advisors, waiting for the most important thing that's going to happen today, apart from the result, which actually is going to happen tomorrow, is the exit poll that comes out at 10 p.m. British time. So 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, daylight saving time, or 8 a.m. Real time here in Queensland, and that will give an indication of actually what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about that blackout in a moment, because if our viewers watched Sky UK, which they won't because they'll stay with us and watch Paul Murray live shortly, but you wouldn't be seeing anything about the election. But let's talk about that in a moment, because I'm intrigued by that. But let's focus first of all on that turnout issue that you mentioned, because this to me is such an unknown in this election. It's the first one held in December since, well, it's about 100 years since the last time there was an election held in December in the middle of winter. What sort of implications does that carry for turnout and for the polling around this?
Well, so the two questions there. In terms of the turnout itself, it's when people woke up at 7 o'clock this morning over there when polls opened, it's still dark. Especially up in Scotland, you're looking at the sun going down, 3, 4 o'clock. So it's dark, it's cold, it's wet, it's miserable. The last thing you really want to do probably is totter on down to an empty, cold hall and vote for a political party. So that's why the Get Out the Vote operation is so important, to make sure that the weather does not stop people from getting out and voting. Now, traditionally it is thought that bad weather helped the Conservatives. That Labor people were less likely to vote because of the weather being rubbish, or that the Tories had more cars and were able to then get people out and deliver them to the polling station. I don't think that really stands as much as it used to. In terms of the polling, yes, it will have an impact on, and this is what's interesting about all the pollsters have said, yes, it's narrowing. Because they're all, I think, a little bit scared about having been burnt. So they've all got their talking points about that it's narrowing, because actually it is probably a close election when you look at what the Tories need to do to ensure that they get a working majority. So the magic figure for the Tories has always been getting that 42%, 43%, whereas Labor, they can get a working majority, this is when Tony Blair was around, with a vote that's only in the 30s. So there's it's not an official gerrymander, but there's an impact upon that Tory vote. So it goes back to that machine. Which machine is the best machine at getting out the vote? And that's why the leaders are so important, and what's happened with Labor imploding. Now, don't underestimate the Labor machine here in terms of what Corbyn's doing with all the momentum, and the momentum for the far-left activists. These people are motivated. They'll go and knock people up. Sorry, I mean, that's a phrase over there, knock people up to get them out to vote. But the traditional Labor voters, those Leave voters, they don't like Jeremy Corbyn. You know, Boris, I think, could be in a world of trouble if you had a traditional Labor leader. If you had someone like a Tony Blair there, a David Miliband, you know, someone like that, Boris could be in trouble. But they don't. The choice is between Corbyn and Boris.
Yep, indeed. And Corbyn has just been so unimpressive right throughout. It's hard to see how he gets anywhere near the numbers he needs. But let's look at we mentioned the blackout. Okay, so there's nothing in the last 24 hours. Basically, they've got to rely on their campaigning up until this point. I'm just really interested to see what your take is from afar of the Johnson campaign, because we've seen some wonderful moments like the Love Actually moment when he goes to the door with the cards, and, you know, with the pitch, the Tories, the Conservative pitch, which is fantastic. We've got the pictures of now Jeremy Corbyn, I believe, going to vote in his constituency, and a bit rough, those pictures, understandably. Lots of cameras there on what looks like a bleak day, but there he goes, the red badge on the way in to have his vote. Jeremy Corbyn, who, let's be frank, makes a lot of his own side uncomfortable. Some have said, in fact, left the Labor Party because of his leadership, because of his anti-Semitism and so on. But let's go back to this issue of the campaign, because you are a campaigner, you're a strategist, you've seen those pictures of Johnson at the door and those stunts and delivering milk and so on, but he hasn't done some serious interviews like with Andrew Neil of the BBC or Piers Morgan. What have you made of it from afar? Has he had a good campaign, your former boss?
I think he has had a good campaign, and I think he personally has had a good campaign. I think the Tories have run a very good campaign in terms of that. You know, the Love Actually meme, or whatever you want to call it. That is brilliant because it is about being shared. So we've got the blackout happening at the moment. That doesn't stop Mr. and Mrs. Stringbag sharing that on their Facebook and saying, have a look at this. Getting that cut through in terms of sometimes it's cheap and cheerful, the ads that the Tories have done. So it's that's why we're getting through the blackout. Yes, he hasn't done a couple of serious interviews, but he has been Prime Minister now for 3 or 4 months. He has done other interviews. It's a little bit of what I would call minimising harm. You don't want to put Boris up in front of Andrew Neil, who is a brilliant interviewer. Like, this guy is, he is the bee's knees. He is serious, and you don't want to put to put doubt into people's minds that Boris may not be up to the job. So I totally accept that as a tactic and would support that.
James McGrath, thanks so much for your insights. We'll talk to you tomorrow during the election day, or as the votes are coming in after the polling closes. Thanks very much for that.